Now that our foundation's had enough time to set solid, and we're going to commence with our cornerstone. We have to do cutouts on these bricks for engineering purposes, and we have to cut notches for the reinforcement bar to be able to fit between all the blocks. They're all lining up perfectly. This is a good example of how we push the concrete through all the voids.
Close the door and leave the light on. The morning light should be coming soon. Kick off your shoes and leave the winter and the pain it brings to you. Lay your head upon my shoulder. Shut off your thoughts and clear your mind.
Now that our foundation's had enough time to set solid, we're going to get started on our block wall, and we're going to commence with our cornerstone. This cornerstone has to be placed in exactly the right position, as all the other blocks are going to join to it. And we're using a system of dry setting our block wall, so there's no mortar in between to make up for any gaps. So this has to be placed in exactly the right spot. We're aligning this corner block with the existing deck, so the wall and the deck will line up together and look architecturally pleasing. Once we're satisfied it's level, we take some measurements for the blocks we're going to have to make cutouts for. We have to do cutouts on these bricks for engineering purposes, so the concrete and steel can flow through everything properly. We'll be cutting our concrete block on our wet saw. I always wear eye and ear protection when I'm operating my wet saw. And we have to cut notches for the reinforcement bar to be able to fit between all the blocks for its engineering strength. So we have to cut it on a couple of different sides, lined up to that corner block. After slicing the block with our wet saw, we just use our lump hammer to tap out the voids necessary for this rebar that's going to go through the whole system. We wash it clean with our hose after we're finished cutting because we don't want any of the residue to impair the concrete sticking to it later on.
Nobody knows what's down the river's flow. Nobody feels the pain. Nobody knows what's down the river's flow. Are you strong enough to break these chains? Are you strong enough to break these chains? Close the door and leave the light off. The morning light should be coming soon.
We place our prepared block tightly against our corner block. As I mentioned before, we're doing dry set, so there's no mortar gap between these blocks. When we're satisfied with a tight fit in our alignment, we just lay the next block next to it, double checking with our level and adjusting our packers to create a 10mm gap underneath on top of the slab. Adjusting the block to be completely level can take a bit of time. Swapping out different thickness packers to get it exactly plumb. We continue to double check with our small level that all the blocks are lining up perfectly flat with each other.
Nobody knows how to stem the river's flow. Are you strong enough to break these chains? Are you strong enough to break these chains?
Now that we're satisfied that the blocks are all coming together properly, we cut all the rest of the blocks we're going to need for this part of the wall on our wet saw. As we lay out the blocks to the end of this row, we can see that they're all lining up perfectly with the rebar we set inside our foundation.
Nobody knows how to stem the river's flow. Nobody feels the pain. Nobody knows how to stem the river's flow. Are you strong enough to break these chains? Are you strong enough to break these chains?
We continue to just lay the blocks out hard up against each other, adjusting with the packers as we need to. This first course is only a small course because of our configuration of our wall has a full block step down in it. We're just trying to get this small section of the wall laid out today so we can set it up with cement and then put the second course on top, which will continue over to the full length of the wall. Here I'm adjusting this block back into alignment as gently as possible so they all stay dead straight.
I offer peace and understanding for the things that you seek to find. Nobody knows how to stem the river's flow. Nobody feels the pain.
Here you can see the cutouts on the back of the blocks line up with the vertical rebar in the foundation. We'll be tying rebar through those cutouts later after we've got these blocks set in concrete. We designed this foundation so it'd be 10 mil lower than it should be. That way we can have our 10 mil packers underneath the blocks. This will help the concrete spread out underneath and glue the block to the concrete foundation later on, as you'll see. We just take our time with this process as there's no rush.
Nobody knows how to stem the river's flow. Nobody feels the pain. Nobody knows how to stem the river's flow. Are you strong enough to break these chains?
Because we couldn't make the foundation exactly 10 mil lower than our finish height, we have to adjust with different size packers. So some of them might need an 8 mil packer and some might need a 12 mil packer.
Close the door and leave the light on. The morning light should be coming soon. Kick off your shoes and leave the winter and the pain it brings to you.
So the first course is laid. Just going to fill that with a little bit of concrete to lock it in before we put our next course on. We'll keep this backside open so we can dump a big lump of concrete in there later for strength.
I use a slightly specialised concrete mix for this process. It has bondcrete in it to help the block adhere to the concrete foundation. It also has 1 shovel load of mortar mixed in with my normal 6:1 ratio of concrete mix. This is to help it flow underneath the blocks to get a really good adhesion. We pour this concrete in our blocks really gently because there's nothing actually holding these blocks to the foundation at this point. But because they're all tightly packed up against each other, they're quite stiff and solid in their place. So as long as we don't bump them or pour too much concrete in at once, they won't move. But the trick here is to be very gentle as we pour the concrete in.
Nobody knows how to stem the river's flow. Nobody feels the pain.
We just keep an even spread of concrete throughout the whole wall. And we're trying to fill about 50 to 100 mil in the bottom of each block so the concrete pushes through underneath. This is what's going to stick the concrete to the foundation. Once we've poured our first batch of concrete into the block, we start agitating the concrete to make sure it pushes through underneath, through the packers, and spills out onto the foundation. This is acting like a glue. It's going to bond these blocks to the foundation.
And the pain it brings to you. Lay your head upon my shoulder. Shut off your thoughts and clear your mind.
This is something I take my time at and kind of enjoy the process, as I've done all this work to get to this stage. And I want this bottom courser block to stick really solidly to the foundation. So I'm just going to take my time and make sure all the concrete goes through all the little cracks and voids.
Nobody knows how to stem the river's flow. Are you strong enough to break these chains? Are you strong enough to break these chains?
Get the wet cement down deep in those voids in the concrete blocks. So a little bit of it seeps through underneath. It's sitting up on 10mm packers. This will help the concrete bind the block to the foundation. Plus we have the rebar, which is all tying it together. This is a way of setting our blocks so we can lay more blocks on top tomorrow when these are set up.
Nobody feels the pain. Nobody knows how stem the river's flow. Are you strong enough to break these chains?
With our first batch of concrete all agitated in, we add another batch of concrete on top to create a really solid bond with this foundation. We take extra care when we're pouring the concrete into this hollow block because we're using split-faced block. It's highly textured on the facet that's going to be exposed in the final job, and concrete can stick to it quite easily and stain it. So we take extra care to not get concrete on, and if we do, we wash it off immediately.
Lay your head upon my shoulder. Shut off your thoughts.
We continue to spread the concrete evenly throughout the block system, trying to fill enough concrete inside each block so a little bit spills over in the cutout we created with our wet saw.
Nobody knows how to stem the river's flow. Nobody feels the pain. Nobody knows how to stem the river's flow. Are you strong enough to break these chains? Are you strong enough to break these chains?
Once our final load of concrete's poured into our block, we go back to agitating the concrete, pushing it through all the voids and cracks. We take our time with this process because we need this first course to stick really solidly to the foundation, as we have 4 more courses to sit on top of it. At the very end, when we fill this with concrete, it's really the rebar and the concrete inside the block that holds the whole system together. But as we're constructing it, this part of the process is what's going to hold the wall up.
Nobody knows how stem the river's flow. Are you strong enough to break these chains? Are you strong enough to break these chains? Close the door. Leave the light off. The morning light should be coming soon.
You can see here how the corner block is not hollow like the standard blocks. It's solid and half the thickness of the standard hollow block. But by piling up the cement behind it with the rebar, it'll stay solid in place.
Lay your head upon my shoulder. Shut off your thoughts and clear your mind.
This is a good example of how we push the concrete through all the voids we created with our wet saw, with the gaps that join the blocks together and the cutout on the back of the block. The end of this block wall ties into a natural stone wall here, which we haven't got started yet. But once we get the first couple of courses of this block wall in, we'll be building the foundations for this stone wall that ties into this back corner. That's going to help hold up this block wall.
Yeah, so we've filled it all with cement, kind of worked it in best we can. And that sets up, they're all locked into the foundation. And then later we're going to backfill this whole area with concrete and recycle bits of concrete just to create a big masonry mass.
After finishing this first course, it's nice to take a break and enjoy the surroundings.
Nobody knows how stem the river's flow. Nobody feels the pain. Nobody knows how stem the river's flow. Are you strong enough to break these chains?
In our next episode, we'll continue building this wall with our second course.
Well, yesterday we got the first foundation block in. We'll be adding some steel through these voids. Use these rod ties. This makes it quicker and easier to lock your rebar together.
Leave the winter and the pain it brings to you. Lay your head upon my shoulder. Shut off your thoughts and clear your mind. I offer peace and understanding for the things that you seek to find.
Thanks for joining me this week in my YouTube channel. Check the link below, and while you're at it, hit the subscribe button or make a comment so I can help you with your future construction solutions. And don't forget to follow our channel for more ideas and how-to tips for home and garden projects.